Tulsi Gabbard went on Sean Hannity's show and talked about Roe versus Wade being overturned. That ruling should drop in a month or so, or month or two. Look at what she pivots the conversation to.
To be heard. I think it's also critical to point out that this leak sets a very, very dangerous precedent for our Supreme Court for three important reasons. Number one is, first of all, this person is a thief who stole...
Okay. She said this is a dangerous precedent and this person is a thief. Why is the precedent dangerous? Why is it dangerous? Like, what happens if future Supreme Court decisions get leaked a couple months early? What happens? Here's your answer. Nothing. You have a more informed electorate a couple months before the decision actually drops. There's nothing dangerous about that. How is more information for the American people dangerous? It's not. In fact, it's a positive thing. And to call this person a thief, okay, was Daniel Ellsberg a thief when he got us the Pentagon Papers, which showed how the U.S. was committing war crimes and atrocities in Vietnam and using napalm and Agent Orange? Now, in that instance, by the way, the information was classified. So technically, under the law, he was a thief. But it was the right thing to do, because he was giving more information to the American people. That's the same thing that's happening now. Why? Because you disagree with the political outcome of it, all of a sudden it's dangerous? And you know, the person's a thief? Well, if this person's a thief, I guess you could say Edward Snowden too, because he leaked top secret information about how the government's spying on us. Now, in those instances, you would say, hey, this is a whistleblower or a leaker. You'd use more neutral language than thief. But in this situation, she's all in on, you know, it's a thief. This is dangerous. Guys, let me explain something to you. The only reason we're even having the conversation about the leaker, the only reason, is because there are many people on the right who don't want to discuss the substance of the opinion. Because they know, even if they agree with that opinion legally, they know it is a super unpopular opinion. Only 19% of the country wants abortion to be illegal in all cases. Well, guess what? Now in over 20 states, that's going to be what happens. Abortion will be illegal in all circumstances in over 20 states. Up to as many as 24 states. So they know their position is unpopular. There's a new poll that came out. It showed only 5% agree with overturning Roe versus Wade. So they don't want to lean into that. So instead they change the conversation, they deflect and they obfuscate, and they talk about how, you know, egregious it is that somebody gave the American people uncomfortable information that we don't want them to see. And Tulsi's more than happy to go right along with this bogus right-wing narrative and give them their talking points and be the equivalent of like, I'm the good one on the left who agree with you guys.
This information, released it with a very specific intent to try to incite protesters and intimidate and pressure our Supreme Court justices.
So what? Even if that were true, which I don't know if that's true, somebody could have leaked it just because they have a conscience and they want the American people to see what's coming. Hey, this is what's coming, just so you know. But even if they did leak it with the intent of, I hope this gets people to protest, so what? That's political advocacy. And that's the same kind of political advocacy that you're seeing from the Supreme Court. Contrary to what silly people tell you, every decision from the Supreme Court, whether it leans right or it leans left, is inherently political. Interpreting laws is inherently political. Trying to uphold the Constitution is inherently political, because you're dealing with different interpretations based on your own biases. Nobody can rise above all of their biases and be perfectly objective. Everybody likes to think they're perfectly objective, and they might try to be perfectly objective, but your own life experience and your own thought process and your own rationality and your own reason is going to lead you to certain conclusions. It is all inherently political. So the Supreme Court is making a political decision. The idea to leak this is also a political decision. Why is it she's okay with one of the political decisions, but the other one she's not? Guys, I want you to understand something, and I mean this from my core. I mean this from my soul. If this was a leak of a decision that was super left-wing, and it made the left get up in arms about, why would you leak this? Oh my God. I would say the exact same thing I'm saying now. I would say, who cares? Who cares about the leak? Let's talk about the substance. Who cares about the leak? I wouldn't care if every single Supreme Court decision was leaked a couple months early. I would not care at all. And they're making all these nonsense arguments, too. People are saying, like, but you need the court to be a deliberative body and to be, to not hear any outside pressure. Why? Why? They could still be deliberative while knowing that other people disagree with them and disagree vehemently with them. By the way, as they do on this topic, the polls are astoundingly against them. In other words, the argument is the Supreme Court needs a safe space because they're precious snowflakes and they can't deal with any dissent or disagreement.
To make a political decision rather than a decision that is based on the Constitution.
Okay, I love this. When the court agrees with me, it's a constitutional decision. When they disagree with me, it's a political decision. When a person agrees with me, it's a constitutional decision. When they disagree with me, it's a political decision. It is all political, Tulsi. And you know that. Everything is political.
Number two, we have the fact that the Supreme Court is not in place to legislate from the bench. People's representatives at the state level, at the federal level, are charged to make laws, not the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court needs to make decisions based on the Constitution. And the Department of Justice, lastly, needs to go and prosecute this crime, which is exactly what it is, and make an example out of...
How is it a crime? And by the way, I'll go a step further. Even if it is a crime, it shouldn't be a crime. Technically, what Edward Snowden did broke the law. But that shouldn't have been the law. That was information we had the right to know. So even if it does break a law, which I don't think it does, even if it does, it's fine. That shouldn't be a law. From what I heard, it's a tradition. Oh, we don't leak stuff here. They've never leaked anything out of the Supreme Court. So, first time for everything. Who cares? You guys care. Or actually, you pretend to care.
The person who leaked this information, because our Supreme Court justices cannot operate under the fear that they will...
Because they're snowflakes, and they need a safe space, and they can't deal with anybody disagreeing with them?
Have partisan political activists in...
They are partisan political activists, Tulsi. Everything is political. Everything is political. For the love of God, get that through your head.
Their house, intimidating and threatening their ability to do their job per the Constitution.
And there was
Nobody's intimidating them. Nobody's threatening them. They're dealing with a logical consequence to them overturning 40, 50-year precedent. People are going to be upset by that. That's the way the world works. So now you're telling me they have a right to overturn this precedent, but also protect themselves from any negative emotions of disagreement or activism against their position? It's preposterous. There's one other part that... I just want to run it back for a sec, because there's one other part that really got under my skin.
The Supreme Court needs to make decisions based on the Constitution, and the Department of Justice, lastly, needs to...
Okay, they need to make decisions based on the Constitution. What she's not acknowledging, and what everybody who's dishonest in this conversation does not acknowledge, is that, number one, everything is political, no matter what side you fall on. Number two, both sides are making an argument that they are upholding the proper interpretation of the Constitution. So look, under this, Roe versus Wade. This is Roe versus Wade in Wikipedia. Let me read you some of this because it's interesting. In January 1973, the Supreme Court issued a 7-2 decision in McCorvey's favor, ruling that the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution provides a, quote, right to privacy that protects a pregnant woman's right to choose whether to have an abortion. It also ruled that this right is not absolute and must be balanced against government's interest in protecting women's health and prenatal life. The court resolved this balancing test by tying state regulation of abortion to 3 trimesters of pregnancy. During the first trimester, governments could not prohibit abortions at all. During the second trimester, governments could require reasonable health regulations. During the third trimester, abortions could be prohibited entirely so long as the laws contained exceptions for cases when they were necessary to save the life or health of the mother. Okay, now, so you could see here, the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, they interpreted that as giving a right to privacy. Well, let's read the 14th Amendment. Or actually, you know what? Let's go back and let's read the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. In the United States constitutional law, the Due Process Clause is found in both the 5th and 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which prohibits arbitrary deprivation of life, liberty, or property by the government except as authorized by law. Okay. So, in other words, they viewed prohibits arbitrary deprivation of life, liberty, or property. So what they say is, this was their interpretation of the Constitution. The government telling a woman, let's say she's 4 weeks pregnant, the government stepping in to say, I am going to ban you from terminating this pregnancy. That is government overreach. That is deprivation of somebody's life, liberty, and property. So they have a fundamental right that early in the pregnancy to make that decision on their own. The government cannot be so large and so authoritarian and deprive so much liberty that they say the state is going to force you to be an incubator and carry that baby to term. That was their interpretation of the Constitution, that a reasonable reading of the plain-faced language would allow the wiggle room for people to decide, up until a certain point, this is my choice. This is my choice. Now, people are free to disagree with that interpretation, but don't act like if you take a pro-choice stand or if you agree with Roe versus Wade, you just don't believe in the Constitution, or there is no interpretation of the Constitution that, would make that seem reasonable. Because that's just hack shit. It's just strawmanning your opponents. And by the way, if we want to have a deeper legal conversation here, in the wording of the opinion that was just released, which overturned Roe versus Wade, they made an argument. Look, these so-called rights are not deep-rooted in our history. So that's their perspective, their political perspective and their constitutional perspective, is that, okay, you guys are sort of functionally making up rights here. Okay, well, what other rights are not deep-rooted in our history? What other rights happened relatively recently in the grand scale of things? Gay marriage. Gay marriage was very recent. That's not, quote, deep-rooted in our history. Should we throw out gay marriage? I got bad news for you. Interracial marriage, in the grand scheme of things, is a relatively recent thing. So the same logic that they're using to overturn Roe v. Wade, they could overturn interracial marriage, gay marriage. They could allow sodomy laws again and say, you don't have a right to sodomy. So if a state wants to ban it, they can ban it. They could throw out physician-assisted suicide laws, which exist in certain states. When somebody's a terminally ill patient, they have cancer, they're in so much pain, they say, you know what, I want to take my own life. Under the Constitution now, it's like, okay, well, you have a right to determine that. A state has the right to make a law that says, you know what, if you want to go ahead and decide to die when you're terminally ill, that's fine. Certain states have that on their law books. They could throw that out and say, you're not allowed to make that decision. You don't have a right to make that decision. Why? Because that's not a right that's deep-rooted in our history. So if you really want to have a complex legal conversation here, the logic that's being implied to make this decision in Roe versus Wade has very far-reaching consequences. Now, I'm not going to sit here like a hack and say, there is no legitimate constitutional argument on that side. Because, yes, if you interpret the Constitution as just what our founders wanted and that's it, then there is a legitimate constitutional argument on that side. But I would like it if we had people in the conversation who were willing to treat the opponent's view in an intellectually serious way, as opposed to strawmanning and being flippant and glib and acting like whenever I believe something is constitutional, whenever you believe something is political. No, everything is both constitutional and political. And our biases inform everything we do and everything we say and all of the rulings. And you could find constitutional arguments to back yourself up, and you can find political arguments to back yourself up. And both sides do that. But she's not willing to be honest about it. And, just harping away on the fucking leak. Harping away on the leak. God, it's just such hack shit. I couldn't believe when I saw social conservatives notch their biggest victory in a generation, and instead of, taking the W and celebrating, a lot of them, by the way, credit to Marjorie Taylor Greene, who did take the W and celebrate, because so she's honest, she's ideologically honest about this stuff. But for other conservatives, Ben Shapiro, Megyn Kelly, virtually every conservative in the conversation, they immediately pivoted to, oh my God, the leak, oh my God, the traditions and the norms and the civility and what's happening to our institutions, and this is criminal, and let's crack down on them. It is such a dumb conversation. Things have always been kind of dumb in American politics. I don't know if I've ever seen it this dumb. It's just the whole thing's a total fucking non sequitur, a total red herring. It's, Anyway, there you have it. Tulsi, I hope you're enjoying yourself playing the current role that you've decided to dive headfirst into.